Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this next session, exploring the business of sustainability. It's not that long ago that many businesses approached sustainability as something that needed a policy or a written statement, perhaps a strategy or plan, but was often written separately to their main aims, objectives, mission statement, and business plan. And increasingly, it was expected of them. It went from a nice to have to a need to have. But as the challenges our planet and people are facing become more critical, more urgent, there's no longer simply an expectation for businesses to be more sustainable. They simply have to be, regardless of their size, their sector, their stage of growth. And that, of course, means there's a huge opportunity to build a business that's better for its people, better for its investors, better for the planet, better all round, and to build that from the very, very outset. Rather than see sustainability as a nice to have policy, our panel today will talk about how they've built it into their core businesses from the very beginning and share their tips on doing this simply and without huge expense. My name is Lynn Robertson. I'm the Enterprise Education Lead at Santander Business Banking, and over the past year, working with some amazing colleagues and partners, I've been increasingly looking at what we can do to better support our SME customers on their sustainability journey. So I'm really delighted today that I'm joined by Josephine Phillips, founder at Sojo, changing the fashion industry for the better by reimagining the clothing repair and tailoring sector. Jane Mycott, Enterprise Business Director at Kogo, on a mission to empower hundreds of millions of consumers and businesses worldwide to become conscious consumers by taking action to measure, reduce, and compensate for their impact on the world. And Catherine Lawson, owner of Barefaced Foods, who left a 25-year career in education to pursue her own ambitions as a values-driven entrepreneur in the food sector. And Catherine's keeping it very real today. She's joining us from the Barefaced Food Kitchen. So thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Josephine, for joining us. I don't like doing all the full introductions. I've given you a flavour of what our panel members do, but I'm going to come to them in turn and get them to talk a little bit more about their businesses and their approach to sustainability. So Josephine, could I come to you first of all? Can you tell us a little bit about Sojo and the journey that you've been on?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for having me, Lynn, and hello to everybody. To start things off, obviously we are in the fashion space, and I think one thing that's really important to talk about is how destructive fashion is as an industry before going into anything that I'm doing or we're doing at Sojo. And that is that it's something that people don't often know, I think, because of the glossy exterior, but fashion actually produces 10% of global carbon emissions. And in the UK alone, we actually send 13 million clothing items to UK landfill each week. And with a population of 60 million, that's a lot. Every week, 13 million is going to landfill. So on the back of that, I basically made my sustainability journey at the beginning of my first year of university when I started moving into sustainable fashion. I'm a recovered fashion hypocrite. I was really into fast fashion. I was the one who was buying the clothes from Zara and ASOS, and I think we've all been there. But I slowly realized how destructive it was as a sector. And unfortunately, because of sort of consumption being so ingrained in us in society, I decided to just move my model of consumption to a more sustainable one, which was secondhand clothing. It meant that I was shopping just as much, but I was doing it in a more sustainable way, which it is more sustainable. But I kept facing a problem, which is very notorious for entrepreneurs coming up with their business idea. But I was shopping secondhand, which is an amazingly growing market on the likes of Depop and things like that. But I was finding that sizing was such a big issue. So I loved these clothes. I would find my perfect style. It was great value. It was good quality, and it wouldn't be my size. And with secondhand, everything comes in one size. You can't go up and down because it's not first-hand fashion. So I wanted to alter my clothes to get them to fit me. But I had absolutely no idea how to sew, and neither does so much of my generation. It's after doing some market research, speaking to over 300 people, it was 81% of consumers didn't know how to sew. So I was like, there's this huge gap of people want to engage in fashion more sustainably with sustainably minded habits. They have no idea how to sew, and they're used to the convenience economy, because obviously there are your local tailors, but getting up and going somewhere for 15 minutes and getting undressed and getting dressed and getting pinned and then going back 5 days later felt like way too much time and effort for me. And so I set about building a solution, Sojo, which is a marketplace that connects you to your local seamster through our app and bicycle delivery service, so that you can get your clothes fixed or fitted really easily. And for us, that was really important, because sustainability so often comes in friction with convenience or even price. And one thing that I really wanted to do was to bring it to people's fingertips in a really simple way. And by doing so, we really hope to change the fashion space in terms of slowing down consumption, making fashion, engagement more mindful, by repairing your clothes instead of throwing them away, reducing the amounts going to landfill. And by tailoring your items, you're able to sort of love them for longer, which is ultimately our aim. It's worth saying that our app has been dubbed the Deliveroo of clothing alterations and repairs, and it works incredibly simply. You say what you want done, we pick it up and we drop it back 3 days later. But we're currently going through a pivot where we are now partnering with brands for them to offer repairs on all those brands' items for free. And we think that's going to be really great in the move towards circularity and also accessibility when it comes to sustainable fashion. I don't know if that's my 5 minutes, but that's sort of a background on me, and really excited to chat to you more about it.
Amazing. Thank you, Josephine. And can I just check, is the app available now for people to download?
Yeah, definitely download it if you want to. We're only servicing London, but hoping to expand. So definitely get downloading and engage with Sojo.
Fantastic. We need to plug all of your businesses today, so that's important to get that across. Thanks so much, Josephine. Jane, if I could come to you next, just to explain a little bit more about Kogo. I did chuckle to myself when we had Sojo and Kogo, and I thought, do I need to find another business that fits that model? Anyway, tell us a little bit more about Kogo, Jane, and the role you see it playing in driving sustainability. I touched on the consumer and the business. So I wonder if you could bring that to life for us.
Yeah, sure. And I just one of the reasons we were set up and exist is to signpost people that care and are trying to do things a bit more sustainably and ethically, and find incredible businesses like Sojo. So I've already said we need to get you into the Kogo app. It's just incredible what you do, and it's so important that we can help individuals, consumers, to find businesses like yours and play our part. So Kogo was set up about 10 years ago, in fact, as a charity, because our founder, Ben Gleisner, who's in New Zealand, saw this gap between people wanting to do something and not finding the businesses that could solve that problem for them, or it found it really hard to navigate across, I suppose, all the different sustainability measures and accreditations in place. And also there's a lot of greenwashing going on, so it can be very hard as a consumer to cut through all of that noise to make really well-informed decisions. So Ben created this app where you could kind of find like a directory of great businesses that are ethical and sustainable. We then converted into a business back in 2017. And I think the thing that we are now famous for is we've really deep dived, if you like, on carbon footprinting. So in May 2020, we brought to the world one of the first ever carbon trackers that connects all of your bank accounts and credit cards to give you an instant and very accurate and detailed carbon footprint, so you can find out how where you spend and who you are spending with affects your carbon footprint. And at a very top level, some of the things that we encourage, we have a second-hand fashion action, we have a rental fashion action. So we're trying to encourage people and highlight just how much they would save based on what they've actually spent. So if you took Josephine and had looked at perhaps a previous history, she would have maybe seen that her spend in fashion, lots of fashion from businesses that maybe had a very high carbon footprint, she could really understand exactly what that impact meant for the environment, but perhaps also find some businesses, our secondhand fashion would then help you find sustainable small businesses that can help you take some action. So we're trying to give people better information to make better informed decisions and make it easier to reduce impacts.
Fantastic, thank you, Jane. There's so much there that I want to unpick, so we'll get to that in the questions. But Catherine, if I could come to you next, tell us more about the Barefaced Food journey, and I guess what took you from education to food. And I mean, when we spoke last week, you talked so much about the values that drive what you do, and I just wonder if you could bring that to life for us, Catherine.
Thank you for having me on, Lynn. It's always a pleasure to talk about the Barefaced Food journey, and it's been really interesting for me to hear the other two ladies speak today as well about their own sustainability journeys. So Barefaced Food started in January 2020 after I left teaching, and that had been my career for 25 years. And I left teaching after a burnout. I'll be very honest, I burnt out of teaching after 25 years of working with some of the most challenging young people across Scotland against a background of policies which at the very root of it didn't match my own values, the things that made me want to work with these young people. So in practice, I found that overwhelming in the end and decided that it was time for me to embark on a completely different journey. And that's what brought me to the point where I made the decision to leave my teaching career and do what I'd always wanted to do, which was establish a food business. And at that time, while I was kind of recovering from my burnout from teaching, I did a lot of research around the food industry. And the more research that I did, the more information I found about how the food choices that we individually make impact our individual and collective carbon footprint. So at that point, I decided that if I was going to go into the food industry, I was going to make that a focus for me. And it naturally led me to look at establishing a plant-based food business. Because for me, whether we do it some of the week or all of the week, making small changes to the food choices that we make allow all of us to collectively change what's happening with climate change. So in January, I established a Barefaced Buddha Bowl side to the business, where I started delivering nutritionally balanced plant-based meals direct to people's doors. Now, I started this in January 2020, and of course, COVID hit round about the March, April time, and I had to very quickly pivot from what at that time was my long-term plan to thinking, how am I going to get through the next few months? So I grew the business from there, focusing purely on delivery at this point in time, even although I had other ambitions for the business, but very much thinking if I can deliver nutritionally balanced meals to people at a time when we're all much more focused on what's happening to the environment, much more aware of our own health and well-being, then that's something that I can really push at this moment in time in our local communities. And in a sense, I think COVID, sounds odd to say this, COVID probably launched us in a lot of ways, because we found that we were working in a social dynamic that was changing very quickly. People were much more concerned about their own health and well-being. They were much more concerned about sustainability, and we were able to deliver on that agenda for them. As we were coming out of the pandemic and coming out of lockdown, I then faced the decision about where do I take the business now. Now, I always knew that the aim was there to create a sustainable food business, but a big part of what drove the establishment of Barefaced Food for me was looking at how we could create a business that offered social and economic sustainability as well within the local community. And that was a major factor, and that was where I was able to bring the 25 years of experience in education to play in my business operation as well. So for us, that meant looking at how can we provide a sustainable business in a community where there are young people at risk of unemployment, there's an economy that needs to grow coming out of a pandemic, and what are we going to do to help support that? And at all times of my business journey, the thing I always came back to is, what was my why? Why am I doing this? What are the values that drive me? And when I found myself unsure of what direction to go in, I always came back to that question. And my business mentor at the time would push me on that. He would always come back and say, Catherine, go back to your why. Why are you doing this? And for me, it came back to, I want to add value. I want to add value socially, and I want to add value to my local community. And I knew that I was managing to address that through the food side. But as we came out of COVID, I knew I was then in a position to establish premises, that's where I am today, and to start to deliver on the social sustainability side of things. So for us moving forward as a business, that means actively engaging young people to work with us. actively engaging young people who face challenging life circumstances, who have possibly not had a good road through education and who are at risk of unemployment. And when we look at how we as small businesses can change the trajectory of their life, if you like, change their outcomes, that then allows us to be part of a more sustainable socio-economic picture within the local community. So for me, the journey around sustainability is twofold. It's around how, as a plant-based food business, we can contribute to the planet's sustainability, and how, as a small business in a local community, we can help support socio-economic growth by actively engaging as employers the very people who are at risk of unemployment within our communities.
It's incredible, Catherine. I mean, when I spoke to you last week, it struck me of just how much your why is at the forefront, as you've just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, I'm going to kind of get into a conversation now, but if I can start with you, Catherine.
Yeah.
I just wonder if, you've balanced the whole thing of your profit. You want to make money because you want to be a financially, economically sustainable business.
Yeah.
But you're underpinned by values and purpose and that why.
Mm-hmm.
Was there ever any doubt in your mind that that was the right approach in the business, that you could balance the two? Did you ever feel that one might outweigh the other, if that makes sense?
No, I always felt it was impossible for me personally to drive a business where I didn't have that underpinning value set. For me, that is how, as a business, I will sustain our business operations. So you will, of course, meet young people and entrepreneurs, people who are young in the business world, who will want to establish a business purely for monetary gain. And I understand that for a lot of people, they see establishing a business as a means to making a lot of money. But for me, if that's the sole aim around establishing a business, that won't get us as far as we want to get. It certainly won't get us as far socially or economically, and it certainly will limit the good that we can do with the business as a vehicle to actually make change in our communities. So there was never any question in my mind about how I was going to balance that. The only thing I have to be careful for or of as a business entrepreneur is that I remember the money-making side of the business, because very often when you have got a values-driven business model, if you like, you can become so consumed by the good that you want to do and driving that aspect of the business that sometimes the other side, the being financially responsible when you're learning the business model, that can sometimes get lost. So for me, I have to make sure that I'm always looking at the two sides of the business. I don't want to lose the values-driven aspect and aspirations that I have for Barefaced Food at any point in time, and I'll probably, if I'm honest, allow the values to outweigh the need to make profit at times, because for me, if I am not working within that values-driven model, I will not have the purpose and the satisfaction as an entrepreneur that I set out to have when I established Barefaced Food.
Thank you, Catherine. Josephine, maybe if I can come to you, because actually, you are at the beginning of that journey, and you admitted to, having been in fast fashion, and that was what you were interested in. How did you consciously kind of shift those values, and do you see the same challenges to Catherine, that you need to get that balance because one could outweigh the other?
Yes, I think to start things off, I didn't touch on it in sort of my introductory speech, but actually, kind of like Catherine said, for me, I came into it, the sustainability, from a social perspective. Actually, I sort of was like, especially around the 17-year-old age, I was really sort of an ardent feminist, and I was like, yeah, feminism, women power, like I loved it. And then I realized that the brands I was supporting were exploiting hundreds of millions of women of color, and I was feeding into that. So I sort of was like, wow, the place I'm putting my money is sort of fueling these, rich white men at the top, and these women of color at the bottom are being, exploited, and, the labor rights violations were huge, and I was fueling that. So for me, that's what immediately changed my opinion into engaging in fashion in a more sustainable way, because I thought I want to sort of shop my values and shop my habits. Then I learned about the whole environmental side of things, but both of those passions have been intrinsically sort of inside me as I'm moving into the fashion space. One thing that I think is difficult is, as you say, sort of Catherine, speaking about profit and values. And I think one thing that I found really important is I really do want to build a really big profitable company, because I think it's really important to show that making money doesn't mean you have to destroy planet. It doesn't mean you have to exploit people. It doesn't mean you have to be incredibly destructive. I really want to show that actually you can get a return for these amazing investors and venture capitalists who are obsessed with profit, whilst also not only not harming the planet, but doing good for the planet, because you're doing something circular and you're doing something game changing and regenerative and all this kind of thing. And so I think that that part really excites me, but getting people on board with that is very important, because I think you need to sell that vision, but also you need to be careful who you're taking money from, because I think when it comes to decision making, the moment you're taking on investors, they have to not only be aligned with the profit side, because sometimes decisions will be affected when it comes to balancing profit and values. You may want to make a decision, for example, with us, we want to ultimately we want to, and hopefully in the next year, we want to employ our riders full time. Now, notoriously, gig economy workers and frameworks don't do that because it's not beneficial to the company, but we want to do the whole full-time employment contracts, holiday pay, national insurance thing. And with some investors, that might be like, no, that's not how gig economy works. It's sort of a race to the bottom. You want to pay them the least and all that kind of thing. So you have to get investors on board who believe in what you believe. And actually, I was told by someone that you should write a list of why you shouldn't invest in me, to eradicate those people who don't agree with your opinion. So you shouldn't invest in me if you don't believe in our workers being employed full time. You shouldn't invest in me if you don't believe in us paying £1 more per bag that we use because we want to make it in an ethical way. So all those kind of things, you have to make sure the right people are on board, and then the decisions are a lot easier because you're all on board with one mission, which is doing good and building a great company at the same time.
Josephine, I think it's wonderfully refreshing to hear somebody talk so passionately about the desire to make money in this, but the desire to balance that with the sustainability, the ethics, the values. And I think I've certainly seen a shift. I think over the past few years, businesses like yours would come saying, I need to establish as a social enterprise because that's the only way I can meet the values aspect of my business. And actually now what we're seeing is, no, you can do both, and you can focus on making money and building that financial side, but with the balance of the values and the purpose behind it. So it's really refreshing to hear you talk about that so openly. But Jane, I just wonder if I could pick up on that funding piece, because Cogo are going through a funding round at the moment. And I'm just wondering, are you seeing a shift in funders? And lots of our audience today may be thinking about seeking funding and investment. So are you seeing a shift in how they fully comprehend that commercial opportunity can also come with the sustainability angle? Are they there yet on that journey?
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yes. And I think it is changing by the month and by the minute. It's a very exciting space. And I think just to pick up on that profit point, I mentioned before that Cogo started off as a charity and then changed into a business. And that's because the mission was always to reach millions of people and have impact. And actually, when you are a business, you are able to make more profit that you can put into product development and enable you to have the partnerships to reach millions of people. So I think that's a really good point you make. And our founder, I mean, we were talking yesterday, he wants to create we call it a rainbow unicorn, which is a unicorn business that is not about making billions of pounds. It happens to make billions of pounds because it's managed to reach its mission of millions of people. But the millions of pounds are not to make the founder rich. They are to have good purpose. And we actually talk about divesting the ownership into individuals, more like a crowdfunding model at the end of Cogo's life. But moving on to the point you make, yeah, the market at the moment, I'd say the investment point that Josephine makes is really important. So Cogo, for its early raises from kind of first pound through to just where we're at now, which is our Series A rounds, has had about 120 investors that have been very, very tightly curated to be purpose-driven, fundamentally purpose-driven and long-term. So they're not expecting to make a quick buck out of a tech company by, scrambling to do whatever it takes. It's there for the mission and the purpose, which is all about impact. So one of the measures that we're putting into our shareholder reporting will be how much CO2 have we managed to influence in reduction, not just how much money have we made. And the same goes for Series A. it's got so it's now very topical versus 6 months ago. Carbon footprinting with COP. Jacinda in her address to COP26 last week mentioned COGO. You can imagine what that does for our inbound conversations. But at the same time, we are turning down anyone that looks like they're just in it because they want to invest in the latest bit of tech, or that are also investing in fossil fuel companies or fast fashion, whatever. And Ben is very much like you, Josephine. He probably says no a lot more than he says yes. And that's really important to the mission. And it can be very hard to do, but I think he's always had that first and foremost impact mission. And he doesn't think money, he thinks money helps to do that, but it's not about his own profit. Just in terms of the stats around, investment, what I think is really interesting. So we set a target to raise $20 million US. We are easily going to exceed that. We will close the round early. Our nearest competitor is a company called Economy, a Swedish company, who they've just raised 17 million for carbon footprint tracking. If you take Ecology, which most people are probably more familiar with in the UK, that focuses on offsetting, they raised £4 million in April and were valued at about £16 million as a company. They've just been revalued at 75 million. This space it's hot, without using a pun, on climate change, and it really needs to be. But I think it's there. I think the time is absolutely right. And I think whether you are focusing completely on sustainability or not, you need to have it in the heart of your business, because you will see investment falling away if you don't, because investors are increasingly looking for all of these measures.
Thanks, Jane. That's a powerful message for our audience, because I think sometimes there's a fear that you'll switch funders off, and actually what Josephine and Jane, you're both saying is, you'll switch them on. You'll switch them on,
and we, in fact, some of the conversations we're having are around actually how can we help SMEs to reduce their footprints and have impacts, because it seemed to be such an important factor in the SME space, both in terms of, if it's not part of your core, how do you get the support to make the changes you need to? But also in terms of lending, banks want to know how much risk there is across their lending portfolio, and they want there to be some standard way to look at environmental, social and governance. The governance bit they've got pretty well covered, environmental increasingly, but social impact is there as well, and that will be sort of the scoring alongside the kind of traditional credit risk in terms of where lending goes. I'm absolutely sure of that from the conversations we're being involved with.
Thank you, Jane. I just want to now think of the kind of the other side of this, which is from consumers. So there was a great session this morning from Mintel, really talking about the changes in consumer behaviour when it comes to sustainability, and thinking about the brands. Jane, you mentioned the greenwashing, having much more understanding around that. And I just wonder how much, and Catherine, maybe I can come to you first, how much you're seeing that shift in expectation from your customers and consumers. How much are they demanding from you what you exist to do, but are you seeing them be more vocal and demanding in that from you?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that's really surprised and delighted us. When we are in the premises here, we get into some really interesting conversations with consumers. So we have customers that come in that are regulars. We have customers that come from different places because they've heard about our approach to food. And we get into some really interesting conversations around the impact that we can make through our food choices, and the link to sustainability through our everyday choices that we make. And I think it's good and right that consumers are almost holding us accountable about the choices we make as a business, about the provenance of our food, about how seasonally we eat, how seasonally we would buy, and talking to us about every aspect of the food industry. And it's been a surprise to me, because it's highlighted just how knowledgeable consumers now are. It's highlighted the wealth of information that's at everybody's fingertips. People are really engaging with the sustainability agenda here, and that's hugely supportive for us as a business, because it means that our customers are engaging with us as a business and as a community in our own right. So the conversations that we have are interesting, because what we've always set out to do is to offer plant-based food that gives people choices. And we deliberately didn't go around using the word vegan. And we deliberately chose not to do that because we felt that for some people that turned them off from plant-based eating, because they felt that veganism in and of itself is an all or nothing approach to food. So what we do when we have people that come in and they're maybe not sure about plant-based food is that we talk to them about how it's just a choice that you can make. It's not an all or nothing approach. We're not here to bang the drum about veganism. We're here to show that whatever choices you make in your day-to-day life can impact your own personal carbon footprint. And once we have that conversation, people really engage and hook into it and start talking to us about what are you doing as a business. So for me, it's about opening up the dialogue with consumers, for us, our customers, on a face-to-face daily basis. Open up that conversation, talk to them about what you're doing as a business, because the more you talk about what you're doing as a business and ask their opinion and talk to them and get them to question you, I think the longer standing the relationships will be with the customers at the end of the day. So they talk to us about simple things like my food packaging, for example. Is your food packaging recyclable? Absolutely. Is it compostable? Yes. So they want to know, we have customers that will come and say, if we're going to get a delivery from you, we'd rather not use one-off packaging. Can we bring our own tubs in? And you think that's fantastic. That's the kind of engagement. Those are the small changes you want to see, because collectively those small changes have a big impact. So they do ask questions of us. They do hold us accountable. They do question where our food comes from. They do question things around our packaging. And we're delighted that they do, because all of those conversations open up bigger conversations around the choices that we all make individually and collectively, and the impact that we can have together.
Catherine, thank you. Josephine, I guess naturally come to you, because from fashion, and you spoke earlier, you mentioned that friction between sustainability and convenience, and actually the fashion industry is the one that's had possibly the biggest spotlight over it recently. But from your engagement with consumers, are you getting a similar experience to Catherine? Are they becoming more demanding of what you're doing?
Yeah, I think one thing that has been so incredible has been that we had our launch earlier this year, and the reception, the organic reception, has been so incredible. We're yet to sort of put any money behind customer acquisition. Our customer acquisition is £0, and everything has been completely organic. Our community has grown to over 11,000 organically, and we also have had such incredible press with like full features in Vogue and The Times and Harper's Bazaar, and all of that is because everyone is ready for this change. I mean, it's very important to not talk about everyone, because we are slightly in an echo chamber when it comes to sustainability, and you think everyone's on board with it, and there's still so much to do. But what's really exciting about right now is it seems to be that the market is unbelievably receptive. The consumers are really receptive to what we're building, and that has been really fantastic. And again, kind of like Catherine was saying, when it comes to what we're doing and getting people to repair clothes really easily, we hope that the trickle down effect is like a circular mindset. That means when something else breaks, you try and repair that. And it's sort of about, our mission of making it mainstream and making repairs mainstream. We will not be moving away sort of from fashion, but in people's minds and in consumers' behaviors. We hope that just in general, as we talk about slowing down consumption and changing the way you engage with fashion, that actually affects the rest of their life as well, and that the impact is sort of broader. And I think one thing for us is it's very important with our consumers to give them our service, but we also love talking about sustainability more broadly, and we love engaging them with educational content, and they seem really receptive to it. And I think it's kind of like we're now at this great point where startups are doing it and consumers want it, and it's sort of hopefully going to be this sort of snowball effect where it just keeps going. The momentum that is very necessary is actually there.
Fantastic, thank you, Josephine. And Jane, of course, you're seeing the consumer behaviour kind of like, very intensively because of what Cogo does, that they're demanding this from us.
Yeah, and I could listen to both Josephine and Catherine talk all day about their businesses, because it's so exciting. And I think to Josephine's point, we do sometimes risk that falling into the echo chamber a bit. And I suppose a really good example is that Cogo has its own app in the UK, And that is brilliant for people that want to find sustainable businesses. But obviously the people that probably download a carbon footprint tracking app and use it are probably not the ones that need to know their carbon footprint the most, because they're probably already super aware, and it definitely helps them out. But one of the things that Cogo has done, and this in our conversations with banks, and we did a fantastic partner with a pilot with Santander earlier in the year, but yesterday the UK will have seen for the first time in the NatWest banking app, you go in to check your bank balance, and in your spending you will have your carbon footprint. Now that's going to 8 million NatWest customers, some of whom will go, what is that? I'm not interested. But the awareness is going to start to build. It's becoming mainstream. And for me, when you have brands like Tesco that are talking a lot about sustainability to a very mainstream broad audience, it's not your Guardian readers and your Waitrose shoppers or those that can afford sustainability. It's really becoming mainstream. Then actually the next part, so the first part is awareness. The second part, again, as Josephine nailed this point, was you have to make it easy, because there are some people that will go out of their way to be sustainable. For the majority, unless it's made simple to do, unless it's actually the more convenient option and it's super easy to understand, there are still those barriers that remain. And I think the excitement for me is people are now thinking about how to make this simpler, or how it's not always the expensive option. Secondhand fashion repairing is actually it's really topical with the macroeconomic stuff going on right now, which is that we are seeing a real squeeze on people's incomes, and that's where using stuff for a bit longer and repairing it's kind of good old-fashioned things that we've forgotten in the kind of cheap, convenient spend that we've been through in the last few decades. And for me, getting to millions of people where they are already doing daily tasks such as managing their money, that's how we really impact the millions of people, not perhaps just the green people that are already most of the way there.
Thanks, Jane. And just, I think maybe building on that accessibility side, I want to look at this from a different perspective, which is for our audience today. What are the simple, low-cost steps that they can take to start embedding sustainability in from now, regardless of what their main proposition is, regardless of what sector they're in? What can they do now? And Jane, maybe start with you, given that you have an amazing tool that people can use.
Yeah, I think I would say very much for SMEs, watch this space, because almost every large corporation I'm talking to is now trying to solve these problems. But you don't have to have perfect measurement to start doing things. And a lot of the things that you can do for your business are also going to save you money. So, for example, have you got a current product that is quite wasteful? Can you reduce waste, which would actually be more efficient for you? Are you a renewable energy provider for your buildings, or how your products are delivered? Again, Josephine mentioned using bikes. Well, that's a really good way of building it into your system that may well save you money as well. So I think some of the obvious things, like your energy usage, generally how much stuff are you using, and also what happens to your products afterwards, or your service. What is it that you are doing that has an impact beyond the sale part? Because that is something that is really important. A right to repair is a new regulation that some European countries have already taken on. I think most of us know how frustrating it is if your phone stopped working or your laptop, that it's very, very difficult to repair some of these items. And it's going to become regulated that you need to have products that are repairable. And I'm sure this will sweep across different industries and hopefully into the UK. So I think thinking through what you were doing from start to finish, and just think about it in terms of what's the biggest impact, because we sometimes hear from people that are debating things like, should I have a hand dryer or paper towels in the toilet? If you're still using non-renewable energy, it doesn't really matter. Focus on the big stuff, fix that, and then over time, just little steps can really make a difference, but just start taking some action.
Does that resonate with you, Catherine, in terms of those small steps?
Yeah.
Does it, for you, the investment you make into your compostable packaging, for example, is that significantly more expensive? Or are you seeing that, is that actually a really accessible way for you to introduce this to your business?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And there is a slight cost to that, but it's a cost that as a business we are prepared to pay and pass on to the consumer. And in the conversations that we have with our customers, they are more than happy if we said, for example, we're going to add 20 pence onto every item because that's the cost, you know, for us to get more sustainable packaging. They are more than happy to do that because we've brought them on that sustainability journey with us and because we're getting into these conversations with them. But as a business, I absolutely agree with what Jane's saying around make sure you're doing something, make sure you're taking small steps all the time towards that sustainability goal that you have as a business. If you're new and you're establishing, it's impossible to go in and get everything right at once. And I think we have to kind of take almost the fear out of a sustainability strategy, if you like, as a business, so that people know that every step that they take is a step in the right direction. Now, if you go in at the start and all your suppliers don't have the sustainability philosophy that you like, then work with the ones that do and actively seek the ones that you know that you want to bring on board through time. But it's not, I don't think any business can go in and get it 100% right because we're all learning along the way and we're learning together. But I think one of the things that I would say to small businesses that are starting out is create a network around you. Make sure you're working with and linking with people who have the same mindset, who have the same sustainability goals, who can link you with the right people, who can help you achieve your business sustainability aims, whether that's suppliers, whether it's people that can help you to, like Jane, work out your carbon footprint. How are you doing in that respect? But don't see it as something that's overwhelming. Don't see it as something that's out with your reach as a small business, because literally every step we take as individuals and as small businesses contributes towards the greater societal aim of tackling climate change.
Such an important message, Catherine, those small steps and the network that you build around you. And just picking up on this, on the supply chain aspect, I mean, Josephine, again, fashion industry and supply chain, well, there's a whole afternoon's conversation. But, you know, how would you say you're starting out, how do you approach this without it becoming overwhelming, without it becoming an enormous expense for a startup?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with, sorry, is that, yeah, no, I think that's fine.
You're good.
I completely agree with what Jane was saying in terms of just taking it bit by bit. And I think that whole, I mean, right before we started Sojo, I wrote down every single part of the journey of the business and just trying to look at what you're doing at each part, and what even when we were thinking, oh, we are altering clothes, how fantastic, but actually in the alteration process there might be a cut-off of material, and then where is that seams to pushing it? Are they pushing that little bit of material into a bin? And so you've really got to think through everything. But one thing that I would say as well is, Lynn, when you mentioned like what is a good low cost way for people to be approaching sustainability in their businesses, I think they shouldn't actually be looking at it from a low cost lens. And like Catherine mentioned, you need to accept the cost and accept that the cost actually is a really great business decision, because ultimately sustainability is on the agenda. It's only going to keep being on the agenda. Unsustainable businesses will not be here at whatever point in the future. And so whatever cost you're putting towards now becoming a sustainable company or embedding sustainable practices, you're benefiting from it because customers will pay more for it and you hopefully can charge them for it. But you're also benefiting from it from a business development standpoint, because you're safeguarding your future in an industry where on a macro market level, we're moving towards sustainability. So I think that whatever decision you're making when it comes to what bag you're using or not what bag you're using, that extra cost, accept it and accept that it's a good business decision, as opposed to purely based on morals. If we're just going from a sort of business standpoint, it's still the right thing to do. So I think definitely incorporating that, and as Catherine says, put it onto the customer if necessary. Just let them know, because I think that transparency, that honesty, I mean, there's a fashion brand that on their receipt it says, it literally breaks down what amount of the cost that you've paid goes to which thing, and it says sort of, £10 of this was for the raw materials taken from a cotton farm XYZ, another £10 was for us to package and send it, another £10 was for the labor of the person who sewed it, another £10. And so actually you just see what your money going towards, and then they're transparent about the £17 at the end is for them to make money, and that goes into the business. And I think that allows people to feel comfortable in what they're paying, and so that's a really good way to tackle it if you want to increase prices but don't know how to communicate it.
Josephine, a fantastic message for us to end on. I really want to carry on, but I'm looking at the clock and I know we need to wrap up. But I think this, and I don't know where the time's gone, but I think this angle of the transparency, your message around, if you don't do this, she ain't going to survive as a brand, as a business, because that consumer demand that Jane's seeing driving through Cogo is not going to go away. And Catherine, I think, you know, what you've taught us is that balance and that whole importance of the why behind what you're doing and sticking resolutely to that to drive your business, that money is not a dirty word in this space at all. So I would like to really thank the three of you. This has been a brilliant conversation. We'd love to continue. Maybe we can have a part 2 sometime, you never know. And I really hope that's been helpful for the audience. Please do, you know, watch us on demand if you want to just revisit any of the things that we've spoken about today, but enjoy the rest of the session. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if you can hear me there, Lynn, and the wonderful panel. Lynn, first of all, thank you so much. That was just heartwarming. Josephine, Catherine, and Jane, I mean, the work that you're all doing is just absolutely phenomenal. I think that was just food for the spirit, for the soul, encouraging for everybody. Just, you know, that was just full of, that would be very, very difficult to do a highlights reel of. It would be, because every word you said was just a gem. I hope that people do follow up your business. I was desperately trying to find all the businesses online on social media, but thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you so much to the Santander team. Thank you so much for all of you for spending your time and your wisdom and your heart and your passion for this. I'm sure it's been inspiring to everybody, regardless of their business. So thank you so much. It's been such a joy.